Howdy. This is Mission Texas.
A political podcast about winning Texas by 2032, or else we may lose the White House for a generation.
I'm one of your hosts, Alex Clark.
And I am Kate Rumsey.
Other podcasts may focus on the day-to-day or the next election, but we are keeping the eyes of Texas on the bigger prize. What happens after the next census?
Welcome back to Mission Texas. Today, I'm so excited. We're with Powered by People. You may have heard of it. It's Beto O'Rourke's Texas-focused political organization that's built to reach, register, and mobilize Democratic-leaning voters through high-touch, human-to-human organizing, especially voter registration in a state that has, crazily, no online automatic voter registration. Today's guest is Aimee Prudhomme, the new executive director. She is very talented. We're very excited to have her on. Welcome to Mission Texas.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here talking to y'all.
Yeah. Welcome, Aimee.
We talked about it right up front, but Powered by People is such an important organization doing the actual work of getting infrastructure and coalition built to actually take back the state, both statewide, but also I love that there's been a focus from the jump about taking back power in the Texas House. Can you tell us just a little bit about the organization? And then I want to hear a little bit about yourself too. We love to get into people's origin stories. For people who have no background, tell us about Power to People.
Yeah, Alex, you kind of alluded to this in the beginning, but we're trying to flip the state, but so goes the state, so goes the country is kind of our perspectives. Texas is so big and we have so many electoral votes here. So our main mission is to flip the state of Texas. We believe we can achieve that by building personal relationships with underrepresented voters across the state. And we do that through a community of volunteers. We're a volunteer-led organization. We find, we reach, engage, and turn out voters. Particularly, we're focused on a few demographics. We're focused on the 18 to 29-year-olds, young demographic. We're focused on the older folks. So above 65, we have a vote by mail program that we work on. And then we're also focused on a faith program as well. So predominantly Black churches throughout the state is something we're launching this year that we really think is going to make a big difference. But all of what we do is very human-centric. We are sort of anti the world of mass texts and bots and AI. We're really trying to bring together community. And I think that's what's going to make the biggest difference in this work.
Well, amen to that. And it's so refreshing. I mean, I came into the world of Beto O'Rourke when I was in law school. I was one of the Beto ambassadors. I was the president of the Texas Law Democrats. And
Alex likes to throw around his Democrat bona fides on this podcast.
I say that to say this.
I have none. Yeah.
I say that to say this. Like, I want an army of Beto O'Rourkes around the country, putting in the work and showing up everywhere, regardless of who you are, where you're running. If you can have that kind of energy and commitment to being on the ground, I think that is just magical. I mean, we can capture that in a bottle and spread it everywhere. And I think it's going to be so important to doing the work that it's going to take to build long-term power. And
I want to say something to that point, Alex, that, a lot of people are drawn to Powered by People because it was founded by Beto, and they've had exposure to him over the years and his work in the Senate race and the gubernatorial race and even the presidential race. That I will say now that, I'm part of this organization working directly with him, he's still very much involved, like out in the field with us on college campuses, at churches. And it's just super impressive to me that he's doing the work in a non-candidate capacity.
Absolutely.
That indicates that it's someone that really cares about what we're trying to do to flip the state and save democracy at the end of the day. I think a lot of people are attracted to that. And every volunteer we have has that same mentality when they show up and interact with voters and stay in touch with them throughout the election cycle.
Well, Aimee, can you give us, going back to Alex's original question, like your origin story? Like, how did you get to be here as the executive director? What brought you to the organization, and what's your backstory with politics?
Oh man, that is a a loaded question, but I love to answer it. I probably, like so many of your listeners and people who also feel the despair around what's going on in today's world, I got started in 2016.
Yeah.
I woke
Very
up.
common answer.
I woke up and I was like, I never want to have that feeling again on election day. And it activated me. And so me and my husband just decided on that day, like, we're not going to let that happen again. And we started plugging in immediately. So at the time, actually during the 2016 election, I was living in New Orleans. We had moved back to Texas in 2018. And as soon as we moved back, I mean, Houston's home for us. So as soon as we moved back, we said, let's go get plugged in. We immediately became VDRs, so volunteer deputy registrars, so we could register voters. After that, we got plugged into the Harris County Democratic Party. We started to work elections. My husband became a precinct chair. We started volunteering and learning, oh, this is what canvassing means, and block walking and phone banking, and sort of the traditional organizing that everyone, when you get into politics, that's what you're exposed to. I did work on Beto's Senate run in 2018 as a volunteer too. But I think what really changed the game for me was finding Powered by People. So Beto was touring the state, as he does, going to all 254 counties across the state. He was in Houston and he was talking about this idea. He's like, we're not just going to register people. We're going to get their contact information with their permission, of course. And then we're going to stay in contact with them, because it's not about registering folks. We know the rates are not good enough for turnout across the state. And so when I learned about that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think that's brilliant. Use relational organizing to actually build relationships with total strangers at first, that then become relationships over time. And as soon as I attended my first event, I'm like, this is it. This is the secret sauce. And it's also that human connection that I really was missing and craving in some of the more traditional organizing and political work that I've been involved in.
Yeah, that's such a critical distinction between registered and like engaged, because we know that there are currently more people registered to vote and not voting than there are people voting for either party. They're already registered. Yeah. That's not the problem. It's just they're not showing up.
Yeah, we talk a lot in Texas about, and you mentioned this at the top of the pod, like, yes, it's very difficult to get registered here in the state. That's by design, in my opinion. But to your point, Alex, like, what about beyond? They get registered, and then how do they actually stay educated and involved to turn out, not just in the presidential, which our presidential rates of turnout still weren't good enough, in my opinion, but every election that matters to them. And when we have that personal relationship with folks, we can encourage that. We build trust. And I'm at the point now where I have voters how I haven't even proactively reached out to yet, contacting me and saying, hey, don't we have an election coming up? Like, when are you going to send me my reminders? Which I think is such an amazing transformation story about these voters and where they're coming from, like never voting in a special election or a local election to coming to me and asking me, the expert, hey, where are you at? When are you going to give me my deets?
So Kate and I are lawyers, and maybe this is just me, but I have a dream. I wish everyone had all the election information as like a Google calendar invite. You know what I mean? Because for me, if something's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist.
I thought you were going to say, I wish everyone was a lawyer, Alex.
No. Too much competition.
I don't want that. I want more lawyers.
I'm with you, though. Like the visual, we're always thinking about stuff like that. Like, how do we break through to voters? And based on the different demographics, we got to change our approach and like really be human with people. So if folks need the visual guide, like, how can we best provide that? So I actually love your Google Calendar idea. I almost wonder if we should create one and then link to it, exactly.
And then it's automatically in your calendar. And maybe there's a link that tells you like where your polling location is, like all in one place. And it will send you like a reminder the day before or something,
Click to add to Outlook or Google Calendar.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that idea. But Aimee, can I just reflect on how radical your organization is in a good way? Because just the three groups that you were talking about, most of the time when I'm hearing from campaigns or candidates or groups, there's a debate. It's like, do we turn out more blue voters that are registered, or do we turn out persuadables? And what I'm hearing from you is that we're trying to reach out to even not even registered voters or maybe like low propensity. And so I'm wondering, like, how is that from Beto's experience, especially in these big statewide? Like, what is this an answer to? Did he see something? Like, what is that? Like, and especially as you're now moving into the third category of Black churches, like what are you seeing and what is it an answer to?
I think it's an answer to I think a lot of times if you ask people that didn't turn out, why didn't you turn out? Some of the studies were coming back showing that no one asked me to turn out. It was literally that simple. And we thought, hey, why would we do that there's already enough campaigns and candidates targeting the existing voter population, hitting those triple Ds, as they call them, over and over and over again.
Yeah.
We don't need to turn out those folks. I mean, there's people doing that work. We need to go access the folks that are not activated and then be that trusted person that's going to encourage them to exercise their right to vote. And the reason, we're exploring it, Beto has gone through his campaigns, has accessed all these different demographics, of course. But one of the things that's special about our program is, when we go to progressive Black churches, we not only want to bring our volunteers who may be, older white ladies, to these congregations, we want to add volunteers from congregations to actually register their neighbors and their folks within congregations. So we want folks who look like each other, who have the same backgrounds and interests, to be engaging with the voter population. Same thing we do on college campuses. While a lot of folks that are in this work are retired, people that have the time to do this kind of voter mobilization work, we're building up student chapter practices and student organizers that want to do this work with us. So anytime we get people talking to each other, coming from the same background, that's going to build immediate trust. And then you just kind of go from there.
The tough, necessary work that wins elections, and to be on places that are being ignored or they're just not being invested in by traditional campaigns will only help to grow the party, especially college campuses. Every time there's a tour, a campus visit, you just see the turnout. There's obviously a hunger for this. And as someone from a small town, Sherman, about an hour north of Dallas, it means a lot to me to have someone show up first, and then second to like not count us out, to find new voters under every rock, turn over everything. Right? No neighborhood is too red or too blue. That's the old way of thinking. These are people, and we got to get them registered, and we got to get them engaged. And we got to bring them into the tent. Right? What are the ways y'all have found to bring those people in? Like you said, you go to the church, and then you don't want just the people who showed up there. You want to now bring them into the movement. What has been effective?
Well, one thing I'll point out, Alex, that you mentioned was, not just focusing on the big cities, but making sure we're cutting across all counties in the state, and that no voter or population is kind of left behind. So we have a strategy of like regional distribution where we have regional organizers across the state. Obviously, most of the volume is in the Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin areas, I would say. But we're building up presence everywhere. East Texas, north part of Texas above Dallas. We have RGV, El Paso, Lubbock, Amarillo is a big gap we haven't tapped into in a long time. So just showing up is a big piece of the puzzle. And it takes, my organizing director, Athena Mason, calls it base building. So we have to be patient, because while we have these aggressive targets that we want to hit by the midterms of how many people we have in our reach and our network, we know it takes that time to build these relationships, build trust within these establishments, whether it be college campuses, where that's even harder for us to get onto right now with the state of the Texas state government getting involved, or Black congregations, to be frank. If, we're coming at them and we don't have people within their congregation trying to engage them, it's like that white savior kind of crap that really, we don't want that to be the case. We're all trying to move towards the same thing, but we have to base build and be patient. And that's what relationship building is all about. So we're trying to make sure, while we have aggressive targets, that we don't lose sight of the human nature of this work and how things take time to do it right.
Can you give us a sense of scope with the organization? Like how many people you've been able to register over the years, or how many volunteers, and then kind of what your goals are, maybe numerically. And I would love to be able to check in with you before maybe the general election and see how y'all are doing, and what if we can, help gather you more volunteers. Like, can you give us a sense of that?
Yes, of course. So as of now, we have about 46,000 or so, I would say, voters in our REACH network. When I say REACH, that's actually the relational organizing tool we use in the field to collect all these voters and their information and then stay in touch with them. So we have about 46,000 today. Our target by the midterms is 100,000. And we think it's doable. And just to give y'all a heads up, in 2024, which is when we started doing this work, we had about 27,000 or so folks in our reach. Of that population, the strong majority were 18 to 29-year-olds. And we had about a 79% turnout for the presidential election for the 18 to 29-year-old demographic. For reference, the state average for the same demographic was 37%. National average was 42%. So we were like, hey, this works. Let's continue doing this. We would have had, I honestly think this time last year, we would have had more than 46,000, but we got in a lawsuit with Kim Paxton. We ended up winning that. So we're in Court of Appeals in El Paso said that was, BS, and we're continuing to operate. But we're moving as fast as we can, but also focus on the quality. So, but Kate, to your point, to get 100,000 voters in reach is one thing. Like we could probably do that. It's achievable, but making sure that our volunteers stay in touch with them is a whole nother thing. So we have metrics that measure not only the total scope of voters in our network, but when's the last time our volunteers have engaged with these voters? Do we need to reassign people so that no voter is left behind? One thing we never want to do is take all those numbers, those contacts of voters, and throw it into, a texter or a dialer. Like that totally defeats the purpose of us being human to human personal relationships. So this is grassroots work. You'll know it better than probably most. This is the work it takes to ensure it's done well and done right. But those are some of our targets that we are marching towards. And if you ask Beto, he'll say he wants it. He wants 100 net new. Like, let's get to 150,000 by the end of the year, or 200,000. We'll have to see how we ramp up, but I'm all for it. Let's see what we can do to get as many voters activated this year.
Yeah.
Sky's the limit.
And I love that you're doing it in a way, like you said, that is kind of distributed throughout the state, especially for the purposes of the legislature. I think that's critical, right? Like, I think there is a strategy where you could win the state-wide offices, whether it's a Senate race or a governor's race or whatever, by just juicing turnout in the base, right? Just by like turning over every single voter in Dallas, Austin, Houston, El Paso, San Antonio, whatever. I think there probably is a way to do that, but it gets us no closer to flipping the legislature. Those are already the seats that we already got, right? And it sucks that we have to compete in such a gerrymandered state, but
we have to do both.
There's no choice. Like we have to. We got to do both. Yeah, it's not either or, is my point. And so I'm really grateful that there's an organization that's keeping their eyes on the bigger prize. There wasn't a question in there. I just
we are all in this fight together. Where we can collaborate and partner with other organizations. That's what we're trying to do. Collaborate with candidates when appropriate. That's what we're going to do to make a difference, to flip the state, to save democracy.
Yeah. May I ask on that point, what are the groups or organizations? To what extent are you involved with the Texas Democratic Party, precinct chairs, county? I mean, do you see that as effective? Because somewhat, you might say precinct chairs are those people-to-people conversations, but we also don't have a ton of those. And of the precinct chairs we have, they aren't always effective. So can you speak to that?
Totally. So I'll start from the highest level. So the Texas Democratic Party, we do have a partnership with, and actually when I talked about the target demographic of 65 or older, we partnered with the Texas Democratic Party to do what we call a vote by mail and chase program. So they send out the applications to vote by mail to that demographic, there's about 500,000 target likely Democratic voters that are 65 or up that are eligible to vote by mail. They send out the mail, and then our volunteers actually chase those voters through the dialer, through text. But the kicker is, if the voter is willing to maintain a relationship with us, if they're open to us taking their contact information and keeping it, we add them to our reach. So not only are we doing the traditional phone banking, texting, but if they're willing, we get them added to our network so that they're not only turning out in the primary, but they turn out in the midterms and every election that follows or in between. So that's definitely one organization we've been partnered with specifically on the vote by mail effort. As terms of the county parties, we definitely have relationships with those folks as well. And where we can, like, for example, I'm in Harris County, so a lot of my closest relationships are there. We have Harris County works with some of the college campuses that we're also on, where they have, little HCDP student groups within these college campuses. We get to plug in there. So when we run into the shenanigans that happen, across our campuses, we still are able to engage in that way. You had mentioned, Kate, precinct chairs. We have a strategy. It's not quite underway yet, but we do know the lowest rung of, elected official is the precinct chair, and they're in the neighborhood working with their fellow neighbors. So we are scoping out what we can do across the state to partner with precinct chairs, get them trained on how we use reach to engage voters, and working through the local county parties to train up those precinct chairs so they can interact with their neighbors and then use our platform essentially to stay in touch with their neighbors. So we're really thinking about it from all levels of all the way from the Texas Democratic Party to the county parties, precinct chairs, and in between.
So when I think of data, I just think of it in my own anecdotal experience. So I ran for office last cycle, Aimee, and I used Van. So I had minivan, which is what the Texas Democratic Party has set up here for us. But I keep hearing from other people that there are other better voter data files, or there's other ways to maintain contact. And so are you doing this in partnership with Van Data, or which for our listener is like basically a database where you can look up an address, you're going through, as you mentioned, the triple Ds, like you look up someone, Kate Rumsey voted in the last 3 primaries, and she lives at this address in Coppell, which I won't give on the live air, but, and you can kind of go knock on her door and I will be there, or you can say I dropped off lit, or I was able to talk to her and she's fully supportive. And then that kind of saves the data for future reference. Like, is that something that you use? How do you partnership with that?
Yeah. So our tool that we use, it's called Reach. That connects directly to the voter file. So we work with the Texas Democratic Party. They get the voter file from the Secretary of State, and it's updated on a regular cadence. So Reach, when we're actually using the app in the field, we can look up, Kate, your name, first, last name, and zip code, find you in the voter file. It has all the same information you would see in Minivan, but in Reach, it's a little bit more user-friendly, I would say. The UI is a little bit better. And then from there, I just add you to my network. I get your phone number. Sometimes, phone number is a big one. So a lot of times we have the phone number in Minivan, but it's not actually the right one, or we have like 5 numbers listed for a voter. In person though, Kate, I can say, is this your number? If not, mark is wrong, or I just add the one that's accurate. That way, when I maintain contact with you, I know it's you. I text you on the spot, so I know it's getting received, and then we can have that relationship. So that is definitely, we have to use the voter file, and we do it through the mechanism of Van, which comes from TDP and then automatically integrates with our tool Reach that we use. And then I would say is that for people, because we do have such a big subset of our, 46,000 people who are not yet registered, I would say probably 40% are first-time registrants, or they're changing their address or changing their name, updating their registration. Those people may not be in the voter file at all. So we have the ability to add them, and then we're enhancing the voter file, our access to the voter file in that way also.
Aimee, it's really clear that you're a very serious person who's data-driven and really focused on what's going to matter, what's going to move the needle. I say that so that you can now tell us, given everything you know and all the research and the data you have, what should Texas Democrats stop doing that feels like it makes a difference,
Uh-oh.
but doesn't?
Oh
And if that's too
man.
hot of a take,
I
then you're gonna
might,
have to do
yeah,
it.
I
But
might, I might upset some people. I think that everyone of your listeners, everyone out there should do what they can with what they have. And I mean, I know talked to someone earlier this week, a volunteer of ours who, she doesn't have the ability to go out to college campuses. She needs to do stuff from her home. And that sometimes means that she's writing postcards. It sometimes means that she is like stuffing mailers for us. Like she is doing what she can with the resources that she has to give. I have the ability, the privilege to be able to do more. I just don't want to discourage anyone from the things that they're doing. That being said, I think the relational work is the most important work. It's also the hardest, the most labor intensive, but I think it's the tactic that actually works and builds community and makes you feel good too. Like you get that instant gratification working with a voter in person, then, sending the postcard or doing the phone bank and getting yelled at half the people that, pick up the phone. So that would be my answer to that, Alex. It's like, do what you can with what you have.
I'll rephrase just a little more pointedly, and then I'll leave it alone, I promise. Is there anything you see that's counterproductive that you feel is actually moving us in the wrong direction?
Oh man, that's a good question.
I know that sometimes whenever I'm online, I'll see people who fancy themselves to be political influencers who
Mm-hmm.
I just cringe. And I think, God, I hate that you're representing the party right now. Like, I feel like you're moving us backwards.
Yeah. What I'm finding, especially working with young voters, the 18 to 29 demographic, is that the willingness to align with a party is really diminishing. They don't want to associate themselves with a political identity. So I do think we need to be more issue based and show people what it is we want for the world, for our communities, and less so fitting into the same mold, we keep doing the same things. It's like the definition of insanity is doing the same things and expecting a different outcome. Why do we do that? Like we're seeing positive traction in places like New York with Mamdani. Why don't we learn from that instead of these tired old tactics of the same establishment candidates running the same program? So I'm all about encouraging change, listening to people and where people are feeling that passion and energy and chasing that. So anything that's more of a status quo and like, let's play nice. I am sick of that. And I wish more of our candidates and politicians electeds would do less of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in that vein, I would just say I was out knocking doors last weekend, and you were talking about connecting with people. And I think a lot of people are fearful to go knock on a door of their neighbor or go knock on a door of a stranger because you don't know who's going to answer. And I will say, of all the people we knocked on the door, and this isn't a primary, so most of the people are Democrats and they're in van and we kind of know their voting history, but they were all really positive interactions. And even when I was door knocking in a general election, I had great interactions with people in my community. And so, I mean, Aimee, like, how would you, if you were to give someone a pep talk, like, you can do it, you can go knock on that door, like, what would you say?
I would say, just remember we're all human beings and we all have aspirations and we all have struggles. And I know nowadays we are so like plugged into the matrix that we forget, I think, how to interact on a human level. But I promise you, when you get out in community, whether it's, going to an event and just being with people, like-minded people, or if it's just having a conversation with someone at a door or on the phone or on a college campus, if you're with us out in the field Powered by People, it's going to make you feel different. I mean, I had a conversation with Beto, a couple months ago about like the loneliness epidemic and the depression rates and things going on in our country and in the world. And this is the work that brings people into the light. And that may sound kind of, I don't know, aspirational or naive, but I really do think that's what is going to save us and what will make you feel more fulfilled. So when you do wake up after an election, you're like, that didn't go my way, that you don't enter into this spiral of despair. You have a community of people connected to you that are going to fight and continue the fight.
100%.
And we're Texans. We're not afraid of a fight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So tell me, you got someone who's listening who maybe they've never been part of the mission, part of the fight, part of this larger movement, and they think, what could I really do? How do I even get started? What's the best way to get someone entered? What's that first step on the engagement ladder?
Alex, are you asking about just in general or Powered by People or both?
Yeah. No, if someone wants to get involved with Powered by People, like practically, what's step one?
Okay, step one would be to go to our website. It's poweredxpeople.org. We have a tab on there that says Become a Volunteer. There's lots of different options to get involved. If you are in Texas with us and you want to be out at events, in churches, at community events, on college campuses, you can do our in-person training that we have. If you are someone that can't, that's not something that's accessible to you, we have remote options where you can still contact voters and maintain relationships with them. I'd even say if you have listeners from out of state, we will take anybody that wants to adopt a voter and maintain a personal relationship. That is what we're all about. And then of course we have other options for people that prefer, text banking, phone banking. We use that for recruiting volunteers a lot. So we have plenty of things to immediately activate you and get you involved. If that's something a listener out there is really wanting to get involved, that is where I would point you. Just go to our website and sign up for training. That's the best way to get immediately plugged in.
Yeah, Adopt a Voter kind of made me think of Vote Save America through the Pod Save America, Crooked Media and all that used to do, adopt a region or adopt a battleground state kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, is there something akin to that being done for particularly competitive Texas House seats or Senate seats or congressional districts? Or is there an emphasis being put in certain areas of the state?
Yeah, so we did do that with Senate District 9 in North Texas with the race between Taylor Ramett and his opponent, who I will not name.
Big fans here. We're military. Taylor's military.
Yeah.
He's also a union guy, which I love.
Union guy. Again, when we talked about follow the momentum of the people in the party, people over profit, people over billionaires, that's the energy and folks I want to get behind. But yes, absolutely. We do have specific opportunities for districts when we think it'll make a big difference. And so when we see that, we're always on the lookout for things like that. We do engage and we try to get strategic in that way to plug people in.
It might be too early out, but do you have a sense for what that's going to look like in November for this cycle, the midterms, particular House seats? Or is that going to be a guarded secret that we're not going to tell anybody until after we win them?
Not a guarded secret. I mean, right now, to be honest, we're so heads down, been so heads down, focused on the primary that we're going to see what we get through once we get through this, and then we'll reassess. And I'm sure there will be strategic opportunities, moving forward as we get closer to November.
Something I reflect on as a candidate is that so much money and time is spent around these elections. I remember I spent the majority of my money right before the primary, and then you see so much of that money go right before the general election. And it means that we're just not sustaining it, in my sense, especially for organizing in field year to year. And so I remember seeing Beto, he stood up all these field offices. He had all these incredible volunteers, but then it's who takes the baton, and how to make sure that it's sustaining every year. Whereas we're just sort of lighting money on fire and we have no idea how to actually recapture it. So can you speak to that? Because it seems like Powered by People is somewhat an answer to that.
That is our hope, I would say. But the reality is, like I mentioned before, we have volunteers that they kind of have a life cycle, right? And everyone's got different obligations. It's hard for me to say, Kate, do you want to be a volunteer for life? Do you want to own 300 voter relationships till the end of time? And so, to be honest, I think we're still figuring out how we do this really well. And in some cases, you might come to me and say, look, I have 300 voters that I was responsible for in 2024. I can't maintain contact with them. Something else is going on. Please, reassign to someone else. So Alex, we reassign, 50 to you and, 250 to someone else that has the bandwidth. So we're trying to figure this out. It's not easy. It's still very grassroots, but our whole mantra is this goes beyond elections. It's consistent. We're trying to create an educated electorate. And maybe we introduce, once we get a little bit more sustainable, we introduce something like, okay, if you've been with us the last X amount of cycles, then we're going to let you kind of do your own thing, voter. We'll move you to a more, traditional organizing and outreach approach versus the ones we're hitting like in the middle of that election cycle. So we're still thinking through strategically how we do it. And right now it's like no voter left behind. Let's make sure all 46,000 hear from us ahead of the primaries, all 100,000 by the time we get to the midterms. That personal outreach is kind of what we're marching towards. And I like it because it's not tied to a campaign. It's not tied to a candidate. It's ongoing. I just am really excited to see where it goes.
Build that culture of voting and have these voters flex that voting muscle enough times, that get enough reps in, they kind of know how to handle it going forward. But what you're saying about the life cycle was very relatable. Kate and I are both parents of toddlers, and we just don't have the kind of time we used to before toddlers, and I think it's actually something the Republicans, I hate to say it, have figured out in a way that's better than us, getting parents of young children engaged. I've heard stories of Republican organizations that have like childcare offerings for some of these organizing events, like phone banks or what have you, of just pooling resources and making sure that they can be available. We got to figure out how to tap in to this huge swath of people. I mean, people who I think their hearts are in it, but they just don't have the free time that they used to.
Right.
If anything, I think these are probably our most passionate because they see, I don't know about you, Kate, but after mortgage and healthcare, childcare is my most expensive monthly expense. And so we're seeing the way that the vouchers are playing out. We're seeing gun violence, how it affects our young people. I think we have a lot at stake and we want to give, but there's only so much time, so many hours in a day.
I know, like, how do you pick and choose? I guess that's the ultimate question, Aimee. Like, where do I allocate my time? Where do we allocate our money? Like, how do you offer that to volunteers? Like, how do you get them to dedicate that time, away from, or maybe to fit into their schedule?
We just try to provide as many options so that, whether it's the initial engagement as a volunteer, hey, I'm going to pick this lane versus this lane because it's what makes the most sense for me. Or, hey, this thing came up in my life that became this time sink and I have to prioritize this and not Powered by People. We have mechanisms in place to basically lift and shift voters so that no one, we don't abandon anyone, but we're also supporting our volunteers. And then if you want, hey, you're gone for this cycle, that's okay. You want to come back next time? You already have the training. We just have to refresh you and we'll plug you in. So it's really just, and I'll give you another example. We have some volunteers who really can't handle like the outreach with voters, but want to help with the voter registration, like a lot of your traditional VDR type of work. So they come out to our events, they partner up with someone that is willing to do the ongoing outreach, and they just do the signing of the paperwork, So we find ways, and we have other duties where it's like, can you just hand out the pizza we have? There's things that people can do, depending on how much you're willing or able to give. I think one quote that Beto states a lot when he gives talks about Powered by People in our work is, action is the antidote to despair and the key to victory. And that really resonates with me and kind of gets at what we talked about earlier is do something, anything, because taking action it'll get you out of that spiral of fear and doubt. And especially with us being as plugged in as we are to our phones, like get out of that noise and be with other human beings and see how you feel afterwards. I promise you it'll feel different in a positive way.
Yeah, open your phone settings and see how much screen time you have, and then come back to me and tell me how much
Yeah.
time you don't have. Right.
Yeah, right, right.
Let's shift gears. That was a sad moment to think about how much time I waste on my phone. Let's be happy. And there's a new segment we've started. It's called Good News. I think as Texas Democrats, we've got to get way better about sharing our values, things we care about, our issues. For lack of a better word, to be more evangelical, to share the good news. And so, just to get in the habit, to get in the practice, do you have any good news from your personal life, from your professional life, from the organization that you would like to share?
Yeah, I'll share some good personal news, and
Yeah.
I apologize if I get a little emotional as I share it, but I think I didn't mention this at the beginning of the call when you were asking me to intro how I got into this work, but I left corporate America to do this job. I just started December 8th, but I have been a volunteer for many years with Powered by People. I joined Powered by People in 2024, early 2024, about like 4 months, 5 months after my mom passed away. She sadly took her life.
Mm.
It rocked me
Yeah.
on a scale I didn't know was possible. And when you're in that state of grief and you're also dealing with just the world crumbling around you, being able to put that energy into something was, I think it saved me, and I think it really helped me build community. And I mentioned this before, that like a lot of the volunteers in Powered by People are retired. A lot of them are women. And I felt like, I lost one mom and I gained like 50, to be honest. And there was just something very special about that. And so I think the good news is, I'm now over 2 years out from losing my mom. I feel really good about where I'm at in my grief journey. The ability to take my energy and time and put it into something like this that I think really matters is incredible to me, especially when I was kind of grinding corporate America, being like, what, what am I doing with my life? And like, of course, and the time I wasn't working, I was doing volunteer work, but to be able to fully commit to this is a really special thing on multiple scales for me personally.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Aimee. I really appreciate that. Alex, what is your good news?
Hard to follow that. Aimee,
Yeah.
very grateful that you shared that. It is so powerful because doing work that matters and finding meaning, I think you're right. It's empowering. It's healing sometimes. And I hope more people get the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
My good news is, I guess, in a similar vein, just to kind of timestamp when we're recording this, depending on when it releases, but we're recording this the day after the Vote Vets Texas tour kicked off, and right here in Dallas, Texas. And we were there at Del Sur Tacos, and just
And Oak
an
Cliff.
incredible, yeah, in Oak Cliff, an incredible turnout.
Amazing.
People running for office, veterans running for Congress, for House districts, for county clerk, you name it, for JP. Every branch of the U.S. military was represented. Maybe not the Space Force, but everybody forgets about them. I'm willing to say that.
Nice.
Come at me, Space Force.
That's
Come
amazing.
at you. Oh,
But no, it was
man.
incredible. And it was just really heartening to see so many service members who clearly patriotic, but are not ready to give up on the country that they love. So they're going to stand up and fight back. They're going to throw
Yeah.
their name on the ballot. They're going to step up. They're going to run campaigns. They're going to volunteer. They're going to donate. And they're going to take back the mantle of like, look, this is not okay. And we're going to stand up and fight back.
Well, I think there's such a common thread in this. And I think, Aimee, with you and your grief journey and leaving corporate America and having that brave face of leaving and doing something reminds me of, I was going to totally not talk about anything related to politics, but like it begs the question. My grandfather, when he died, like before he died, and I talked about this on my campaign trail, that he had all these photographs and mementos on his walls in his assisted living facility. And he wanted me to come over one day, and I was like, okay, Papa, like, what am I doing? And he really wanted me to take a tour of all the things that he was so proud of in his life. And there was like walls full of things. He was a teacher. He had notes when he was a teacher from kids that said what a difference he made in their lives. And, you know, he served in the military. He's a veteran in World War II, and he had those mementos and pictures of our family. And I thought, you know, there's not a picture of his graduation degree from the fancy college he went to. There's not a picture of the corporation that he ever worked at, but of the ways in which he served others and the way in which he was enriched and other people enriched him. And it makes me think of every day, like, what am I doing that's going to be wall worthy in my life? And running for office, giving back to my community, knocking on those doors. Like, and I also have found community with so many friends that I've made in this political journey, including people we saw last night with Alex at Vote Vets. And I'm just so grateful for that. And I'm grateful that you were able to find that, Aimee. And so I feel like that's just such a good news. And I'm sure like your walls we filled with powered by people, you know, like to be able to show at the end of your life. So I'm just so grateful for that. Well, that is our good news. And I'm tearing up.
I love that. That's really beautiful. I'm going to use that, that mentality of like what's on your wall. And it reminds me of another saying I have learned in grief, that like joy shared is multiplied, grief shared is divided. So these are going to be rough times. This year is going to be rough.
Yeah.
But we can divide that amongst each other and fight. And we're going to need all that to fight. And so I appreciate y'all both sharing that good news. I love that that's part of the segment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a segment in the pod. I think that's amazing.
And I wouldn't be able to forgive myself if I didn't try to insert this in somehow. My favorite quote on grief is actually from a Marvel TV show. It's from from the show WandaVision. And I think it was really poignant. The line was, "What is grief if not love persevering?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It lives on. Well, thank you, Aimee. That is our good news. And we ask every one of our guests the last word, which is, what do you think is going to take to flip Texas, especially how people can help generally, but also how and you mentioned this earlier about the website, but how else people can support Powered by People and you. So please let us know how we can do that. And your last word.
Like we've talked about throughout the pod, do what you can with what you have. Taking action is going to fight those feelings of desperation. And there's never been, I know we say this all the time, but literally we're on the brink of authoritarianism and fascism. And you want to make sure you wake up on November 4th, knowing that you put in the work this year. I promise you that. So do what you can with what you have. If you do want to support or be a volunteer with Powered by People, go to our website, poweredxpeople.org. You can also donate there if you're not capable of volunteering. We need all the support we can get to continue doing this relational work that I think really makes a difference.
Excellent. We appreciate those marching orders. Let's do it, everybody. Let's make Aimee proud.
We're all gonna join Powered by People. Thank you so much, Aimee. We really appreciate you. And we will see our listeners next week, and I'll sign off by saying, God bless Texas. You can follow us on all socials at Mission Texas Podcast. Email us at missiontexaspodcast@gmail.com. This episode is edited by Juan Jose Flores. Our music bumper is by Adam Pickerel, and our cover art is by Tina Sohn.